1, 2, 3, 4. What up, y'all? Babylon 5 Podcast. It's your boy, Jermaine Event. How are you guys doing? This is episode 201. Now, I know I said maybe about 2 episodes ago, I was like, no more titles other than episode 201. Turns out I was wrong. Turns out that's not the best business practice for growth. So that's not what your boy is gonna do. This is the Babylon 5 Podcast, episode 201. And I guess we can see what the title is called on YouTube. I think I'm gonna call it Ilia is either Ilia is him or Ilia is Himothy. Alright, we're going to talk about Ilia Topuria in his main event fight versus Josh Emmett to show the world if he is Himothy. If Ilia Topuria is in fact Himothy. We are going to talk about that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm like stupidly clicking through my scenes because then I thought to myself there were images that I wanted to use that I forgot to put in here, but whatever. Here we go. Maybe I'll try to get those images as we proceed. But you know what we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk, as I just said, Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett, UFC Jacksonville. We're going to talk about some fights on that card, if not the entire card. And then we are also going to talk about UFC Vegas 76. UFC Fight Night Vegas 76, which is headlined by Sean Strickland versus Abel Smagomedov. His one prior UFC fight before his fight with Sean Strickland, which was a 19-second fight. He finished his opponent in 19 seconds. So not a lot of UFC tape. Not a lot of info if you go to UFC stats and look at this fight, because he's only had one 19-second fight. His average fight time, according to UFC stats, is 19 seconds. Because he's had one fight. So you can't really you just got to watch what you're seeing. And if you see what you see is, we'll get into that when we get there. Maybe if I feel like it, we'll listen to some Fleece Johnson. I just saw this. The Booty Warrior, if you guys remember that prison documentary, and then like Boondocks did the character Fleece Johnson, he's out of prison. Y'all know I fucks with the YouTube prison community, support them heavy, you know, just type of nigga that I am. And yeah, so these Fleece Johnson videos, the Fleece Johnson, that Booty Warrior guy, is out of prison. And he's telling his prison stories, and they're fucking terrifying. The last shit that just came out a few hours ago, I'm like, is this a skit, or is he being serious right now? Because this is wild. And some of the wildest shit I've ever heard, and I listen to a lot of prison stories. Like, I listen to prison stories probably every day. Alright? Prison stories are my new Eminem. I listen to prison stories every day. And if you guys would like to follow this podcast on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Babylon5Pod. You know what I was thinking about the other day? I've been thinking about it here and there, but then like recently I was like, nigga, it's time. I was like a potential rebrand. You know, I think when I started this podcast, the Babylon 5 Podcast, you know, I had come off of a podcast hiatus I mentioned here, maybe you guys don't know, but I was on a podcast with some guys I went to high school with about a year prior to... Well, I think that podcast lasted like maybe 2 years or some shit like that, or a year and a half before I left. And then I think they continued for a while. And then, yeah, it just went away with time, I guess. Not everybody wants it. It's interesting. Just to touch on the fact that I used to be on a different podcast, because some of my frustrations with that podcast, one of the cast members, like, would not even talk, right? He wouldn't talk. Like, he would say something, and then he'd be like, oh, why is... we would be like, oh, why'd you say that? And he'd be like, I don't know, just because. I'm like, you don't want to talk about it? You don't want to tell us why? He's like, nope. And it's like, well, we're on a podcast, and you brought it up. Why not expand? I'm good. And I was watching the Joe Budden shit, and because I just recently been... The Joe Budden podcast compilations, when he had Rory and Maul, they've been popping up on my timeline a lot lately, and I've been watching those, and they're pretty funny. I'll watch, oh, this is the sports analogy, oh, this is Joe attacking Maul, and they're all the same clips, and I watch them. I'll probably watch another compilation today. They're usually all the same clips, and I laugh each time. But there was one where Joe was like, Maul said something, and then Joe was like, oh, well, you want to tell us about that? And he was like, no, I'm good. And he's like, you don't want a pod at all? Like, we're on a podcast. And he's like, I'm good. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably where it was at. That's where it was at. That's where the frustration came from. But what I'm saying here with the thoughts of a rebrand, when I started this podcast, that podcast previously was a hip-hop oriented podcast, and I would fight, scratching and clawing, teeth and nail, to try to talk about sports. I would, like, at the start of episodes, I'd be like, shout out to this fighter who trains at Rufus Sport, just fought for the UFC, won this weekend via blah blah blah. I would just like shout it out, because they were like they were completely against talking about things other than hip hop. When we started the podcast, I was like, we shouldn't make it a hip hop podcast, because it just limited anything we could talk about. And I personally am not that invested in anybody, like in hip hop. I'm not that invested in hip hop or what strangers are doing in hip hop that I needed to make a podcast based off of that. I'm very invested in fighters, the martial arts journey. I think it's very interesting. I don't see how more people aren't into this. Like, it's the best shit. So yeah, I tried to talk about other things. I didn't want to be limited. I didn't want to limit our content, and I, for the most part, didn't want to come in every week just to talk about hip hop and then have to like force these opinions based off of like one quick listen, if I could, of some random person's project. You know what I'm saying? So when I came to this podcast, I was like, I'm going to definitely talk about fights. I'm going to talk about wrestling. I'm going to talk about Dragon Ball. I'm going to talk about everything. Hip-hop, rock. We're going to review everything. That was the original mission, was like, these niggas can't see the vision, so I'm going to go make it happen. That's how the Babylon 5 podcast started. I mean, I never wanted to stop podding. I'm not trying to say it was a thing to get back at them. I wanted to pod, but I wanted to pod the right way. You know? I wanted to pod the right way. Just a little side note on that other podcast. shortly after I left, they added in other hosts that I've seen online that I have very mutual interest in, like UFC. And shortly after I left with the new host, they started to expand out and talk about sports, because I guess it just didn't make any sense to only talk about hip hop when every week the same host that never wanted to expound on anything at all, never wanted to talk on the podcast, like barely ever heard this person's voice on the podcast outside of the introductions at the beginning of the podcast. Basically never heard this person's voice. And yeah, I don't know, they just started, they switched up. I heard that they started talking about sports. I forgot where I was going there. I got excited. That same person. That same person would never. We would try to like review albums week to week. Maybe sometimes 2 albums, like a throwback album and a new album of the week. And pretty much every week, that same co-host that didn't want to fucking talk wouldn't even listen to the albums, so would just agree with what the other host, his best friend, had to say in the podcast. It was fucking retarded. Sorry, pardon me. I'll try to go back in there and edit that, but it was insanity to me. Insanity. So I was thinking about a potential rebrand. Okay? Because when I started this podcast, the point was to just be all over the place. I'm babbling. Gonna ramble off about this as I just did, and I'm gonna go over there and ramble off about that as I just did. But I think we all know this is a mixed martial arts podcast, and I don't know if the name necessarily represents the energy that I'm trying to put out there. So a potential rebrand is on the way. I just wanted to be transparent about that. I don't know. Give me some feedback on that, how you guys feel. Welcome to all new subscribers. This is Babylon 5 Podcast, where we talk about combat sports and maybe sometimes Fleece Johnson. Maybe sometimes Fleece Johnson. It's a Babylon 5 podcast. As I did say, if you guys want to follow this podcast on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Babylon 5 Pod. You guys can email this podcast at babylon5podcast@gmail.com. If you guys would like to follow this podcast on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/Babylon5. You guys can cop some merchandise by going to teespring.com/storage/BOFpod-shop. And lastly, don't just be my niche, be my patron. Head on over to patreon.com/Babylon5Pod, and you can be my patron today, ladies and gentlemen. And we just had UFC Fight Night Jacksonville. They returned to Florida. And I just want to say, poo on you, Florida. I hate the Florida crowd, man. They boo. They got weird booing times. It's like, that's a weird time you're choosing to boo right now. And just weirdly placed USA chants, you feel me, my nigga? That's the place. That's what's going on over there. Why did they zoom out? Video like just zoomed out. I'm like, alright, anywho. I hate that crowd. I think that crowd sucks. But yeah, we're gonna talk about some fights, man. In the headline, we had Ilia dominating Josh Emmett, and I believe it was like one of the first times I've ever seen. Damn, I don't know what the scorecard was. Maybe if I go to UFC stats, I can find the scorecard. Because why wouldn't they have the scorecard on UFC stats? Yep. So Sal Diamato, 50-44 for Ilia. Chris Lee, 50-42, my nigga. Somehow Eric Colon gave it 49-45, which means he gave one of those rounds to... Oh, shit, nah, yeah. He gave one round to Josh Emmett. No other judge did. And it was an ass whooping. Shit. I didn't realize that was going to be so loud. Just looking at some clips here. Let me start that over just because I missed it. Yeah. Topuria is all over this man. All over this man. Unfortunately, Josh Emmett was just too tough for his own good. Like, that leg was chewed up. His fucking left side of his face was absolutely chewed up. Could barely see out of his eye. It was swollen shut. Yeah, it was wild. Alright? It was wild. Let me just turn that volume off. I feel like some shit's gonna happen because that volume's on. Yeah, he's just mounted him. Full mount, just beating him up. Elbows. Just, he just put on a fucking masterclass. Alright? He beat the shit out of Josh Emmett in this fight. And ladies and gentlemen, Ilia Topuria is in fact Himothy. Ilia Topuria is Himothy. If you guys don't think Ilia is a future champion, I don't know what you're fucking watching. We got Marab. Marab says he sparred with Ilia Topuria, and Topuria dropped him 3 times, and he knows he's gonna be champion. And Ilia says, "No, I've sparred with Marab, and I know he will be champion whenever he wants." It's a real heartfelt little moment. The audio's pretty bad there. I don't want to go in there. Oh yeah, man, some pretty good fights. Shout out to David Onama. But let's get back to Ilia Topuria defeating Josh Emmett. He calls out Volkanovski. Obviously, as he should. He should call out Alexander Volkanovski. Who else is on the docket other than the champion? Just beat number 5 in very impressive fashion. He just dominated Josh Emmett, as I thought he would be. I thought he'd be too fast, too powerful, and he lit that boy up. I thought Emmett was going to retire. It looked like he was retiring. And even the way that... Cormier asked him, he was like, "So what's next, Josh?" And he's like, "I don't know. I'm going to talk to my coaches, and we're going to talk to Dana White and everybody, and we're going to see." And it was like, damn, when you took off the gloves, it kind of really looked like you were about to retire. Oh, it says Ilia trains at MMA Masters. That means Ilia trains with Colby Covington. I like that. That's pretty cool. That's probably where he improved his striking, working with Colby Covington. It's all making sense now. He trains with Colby, who should be undefeated. Because, it was early stoppage when Mark Goddard stopped the fight against... Sorry, my wife. I sent my wife the Felice Johnson video, and she just texted me saying she's not opening that video. It's crazy. Damn, where was I going? Just lost myself. Yeah, so I think I was saying talking about Josh Emmett retiring. Looks like he was going to retire. He didn't. I'm not sure what happens next for him. Yeah, I think I was saying something else. Ilia trains with, I was talking about Colby. Oh, early stoppage with Mark Goddard, right? In the first fight. That fight shouldn't have been stopped then. Colby possibly would have won on the judges, on the judges' scorecard. In the second fight, Colby got robbed by the judges. So, he lost to Warlley Alves, so I guess he wouldn't be undefeated, but should have less losses. Let's put it like that. But Ilia looked like a beast. Colby's been helping him out clearly, and he looks to be Himothy. All right, he looks to be great everywhere in the striking. He was so calm, while Emmett by the second round, mouth wide open, starting to sweat pretty hard, and Ilia is just calmly just like sliding in and out, pop, pop, just popping him, sliding out of there, not to be touched. Like, and he got touched once or twice here, like in the later rounds, but it didn't matter. All right, that's what I was wondering, like, how diminished is Emmett at this point? Like, yeah, he's starting to land some, but we're watching Topuria kind of just walk through it. You know what I'm saying? He's just kind of walking through it. Like, all right, you landed an overhand, and now here's the 1-2. Like, he was just walking through it, like, as if nothing happened. So it was like, yeah, you started landing later on. I think maybe in the third or the fourth, but I think in the third he started to land a little bit. But then after that, Ilia proceeded to just really fuck up that leg. Ilia proceeded to, he just pick him apart from that point on. Tuck him down in the fifth. Just beating him up, tuck him down. I think it was either the fifth or the fourth. He was all over, man. So I'd like to see Ilia, of course, fight for the belt next. If not, what's Arnold Allen doing? You know? What's Arnold Allen doing? I could, if not fight the champion next, I would like to see Ilia Topuria versus Arnold Allen. I think that fight would be bonkers. Because Arnold Allen's, like, got his wild punches and bunches style, and he might just be swinging and missing. And Ilia, yeah, I don't know. I feel like we already know how that fight goes. But it was a great fight. Great fight. Performance of the Night award goes to Macy Barber, who finished Amanda Hebos in the second round. Hebos has glaring holes in the stand-up. She's just not good in the stand-up. She comes forward with intensity, kind of similar to how Mackenzie Dern 2.0 looked, you know, when she would just come forward with intensity. But then, like, then she lost to Yan Xiaonan, got touched up by Yan Xiaonan. Jeez. It's so loud. Let's start this back. Got touched up by Yan Xiaonan, and then she touched up she worked on her striking. She looked a lot better in her last fight. Looked amazing against Angela Hill. But yeah. Ooh. Hebos she just sucks in the stand-up. Alright? That's what I was saying last week. Like clearly Barber has the advantage in the stand-up, and Hebos would clearly have the advantage on the ground, but Barber's defense was a lot better. She was able to stay safe, not be submitted, and get out of positions, while I don't believe Hebos has the grappling acumen in order to get her opponent down and keep them there. All right? To get them down and keep them there to fight her fight. Because her fight is certainly not standing up. That's where she finds trouble. That's where she usually finds trouble. That's why I thought she was going to lose to Viviane Araújo. I thought it's crazy to me that she looks so good against Viviane Araújo. Araújo is like 38 though, so I'll accredit it to that, but nah, man, Hebos has always been overrated to me. So I take this win for Macy Barber with a grain of salt. I mean, she looked good when it got to the grappling, so that looked good for me when it comes to Macy Barber. But as far as the striking, she should look that good against Hebos, because Hebos is horrible right now as far as the striking is concerned. That's just where I am with that. I'm trying to go through, see if I can see some cool exchanges. Just to head back to Taporia. I couldn't really, I was like, I could try to find some GIFs, you know what I'm saying? But I figured, since I figured out how to hook up the internet here with this video, I'm like, or my display with this video, I'm like, all right, I could just go through Twitter and probably find some actual videos of the fight. Yeah, he was all over this, man. All right? All over this, man. Doctors coming in, checking this man's vision. Brendan Allen finishes Bruno Silva in the very first round via rear naked choke. Gerald Mearshart in his corner, who also finished Bruno Silva in the first round, I believe. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. You boys be hating on my boy Brendan Allen. Y'all been hating on him for years, saying he's got low fight IQ, but nah, he looks great out there, all right? Yeah, he had some losses when he's 27 years old. He's been in the UFC, 6 years or some shit like that. He's had some losses when he was younger, but now he's like fully into him. He's coming into himself right now. He's calling out Israel Adesanya. He'd like to fight Jared Cannonier for a title eliminator fight next. I would like to see that. He would like to fight Dricus du Plessis after Dricus gets fucking annihilated by Robert Whittaker next. He'd like to fight Dricus du Plessis. I'd like to see that fight too, man. So, shout out to Brendan Allen for the great fight. This was the Peak Martiscal was a pretty interesting fight. That was a pretty good fight. Pretty tough fight. Go back and check that fight if you didn't. Shout out to Phil Rowe. Phil Rowe walked out to Tevin Campbell's Can We Talk, and that shit was probably the hypest walkout for me. They don't always let you see walkouts, but for that one, it was pretty fire. Shout out to David Onama, who they tried to say was toast, but my nigga, he's still the bread. There we go. David Onama knocking out Gabriel Santos and then hitting him with the Adesanya arrow. It's now the Adesanya celebration. It's no longer Alex Pereira. He took that from you, homeboy. It is now Adesanya's arrow celebration and no longer Alex, because Izzy is Alex's fucking daddy. Knock that nigga out. Yes. Just beautiful. Shout out to David Onama. His last fight before this one, he lost to Nate Landwehr, which is when I really started to pay attention to Nate Landwehr, because that was a badass fight. But yeah, so he bounces back with this win against Gabriel Santos. He was the big underdog. All right, heavy underdog coming into this one. So, congrats to my boy David Onama, man. Congrats to David Onama. Magny gets the W. Shout out to Randy Brown. Gets the W over Wellington Turman. As he should have. Wellington was kind of fucking him up in the clinch toward the end of that fight there. But Randy Brown gets the W as he should have. I thought he's the better fighter. Mateusz Roundbeski. Fucking all over this Loic guy. Loic Radzhabov. I thought this fight was going to be pretty even, high level, but Mateusz Roundbeski, how that's pronounced, it's spelled Rebecki, but pronounced Roundbeski. It's Polish. It's how it works. Homeboy was dominating him with the leg kicks right away, and then Loic in the second round went straight to the cage, back to the cage, because He needed that support in order to continue fighting. And he was just getting picked apart until the ref finally, just said, enough of this shit. Enough of this shit. I don't know why it says KO overhand. The ref stopped that fight out of mercy. He dropped him, but he kept dropping him. He was hurting his legs. Keep going these leg kicks. Then hurting him with the boxing, man. Mateusz Rambesky. That dude looks fucking gigantic. He's apparently 5'7". He looks huge in there. He fights 155 pounds. It makes no sense. He looked huge in there. So did Loic. They both look gigantic in there. Much bigger than most of the lightweights, but it is what it is. Tabitha Ricci sticks and moves on Jillian Robertson. Gets a nice decision victory. Joshua Van defeats Zhalgas Zumagulov. I didn't see that fight. I think maybe he went to take a shower or some shit. Chepe Mariscal defeats Trevor Peek. I felt like he was just better than Peek. Peek was getting pretty frustrated because he was not able to touch him a lot, and he's swinging at air a lot to the point where he was showing a lot of frustration. So shout out to Chepe Mariscal. He looked great in there. Jack Jenkins, them leg kicks, pretty nice. I actually thought Jamal Emmers won that fight, but split decision victory goes to Jack Jenkins. And Cedriquez Dumas dominates Cody Brundage with grappling. We saw that grappling was Cedriquez's hole in his last fight. That was his weak spot. And he's said he's been working on it since. And he comes in and dominates the wrestler, Cody Brundage, with great jiu-jitsu. So shout out to Cedriquez Dumas on the victory. Shout out to you. That was pretty cool on you. And now we are moving to UFC Fight Night Strickland versus Magomedov. I've seen James Lynch posts a lot. He posted a video about how this is unfair, and he'll talk about how just the matchup. As I'm saying, Abus Magomedov has had one UFC fight which lasted 19 seconds. Yes, he won, but with one fight, 19 seconds against, who is this? Dustin Stolfus. He beat Dustin Stolfus in the first round. Stolfus has not fought since. This was last year in September, and he has not fought since. So I don't know. I want to see what happens. This is a big jump for Abus Magomedov fighting out of Germany against Sean Strickland, who's admittedly growing on me. As you guys can see here, if you're watching YouTube, as you should, Strickland is the favorite according to Tapology, motherfuckers. Do we have the odds? I do not see the odds. Oh, wait, no, they're the odds right there. I'm blind. Sean Strickland is the slight betting favorite. And I think he has the better striking. As we've seen, he has great cardio. And we know what Abus will want to do. What Abus Magomedov will want to do is grapple. He want to take him down, grapple, and not have those striking exchanges. I don't know if he'll be successful. I don't know if he will be successful. I don't know. As I'm saying, I don't know much about Abus. He had one fight. He did beat Sarabusai, who had a pretty nice knockout this past weekend for PFL. Yeah, we'll see. We're here to see how good Abus Magomedov is. I guess Sean Strickland is the test. If you beat Sean Strickland, you get a title shot. That's how it works. So, Abu Smagomedov potentially fighting Israel Adesanya. or is that just the Alex Pereira perk? Is that just what happens if you're Alex Pereira? You get to fight Izzy next after beating Oh. I thought just if you beat Sean Strickland, you get to fight Izzy next. Oh, that's not how that works? Well, why did fucking underserving as Alex Pereira get to jump the line? Anywho, Damir Ismagulov versus Grant Dawson. That should be crazy. I'm going to go with Ismagulov. Tapology is with me, and so are the betting odds. Dude, this card is nuts next week. All right, Max Griffin versus undefeated Michael Morales. You're seeing Michael Morales again. That's a crazy fight on paper. Michael Morales is looking to be tested. All right, undefeated Michael Morales will be tested in here against a very game Max Griffin. I can't believe Max Griffin's the underdog. That's crazy. Benoit Saint Denis, all right, versus Ismail Bonfim. Bonfim just knocked out Terrence McKinney, I believe. Yeah, just knocked out Terrence McKinney with that flying knee. Insane fight. And he's now fighting Benoit Saint Denis, who is known to let it fucking bang. All right, this is an interesting fight on paper, but I'm definitely gonna lean for the smaller Ismail Bonfim, because what I saw in that last fight, man, that boy was a tank. That boy was a tank. We got Bruno Ferreira on his return, who we just saw knock out Gregory Rodriguez in the first round. If you guys remember that left hook knocked out Gregory Rodriguez. He's fighting, I don't know where this guy is coming. A guy out of Uzbekistan. Nur Sultan Ruziboyev. I believe this is, UFC debut. I was like, I've never heard of that guy. But the fight everybody needs to be talking about, ladies and gentlemen, the return of the Phenom, the Motown Phenom, Kevin Lee returns to the UFC, ladies and gentlemen, and he's taking on a monster. And Renat, fuck, what the fuck you talking about, nigga? The Gladiator. We last saw Renat fight Brian Battle, and he pretty much like wrestle fucked Brian Battle for 3 rounds. Brian Battle was very tough, and that he didn't get finished in the exchanges there, but Renat just all over Brian Battle in this fight. So this is a tough and very interesting return fight for the Motown Phenom and Kevin Lee, who was coming in here the underdog, as he should be. I didn't like what I saw in a lot of that fight against Diego Sanchez. All right? The Diego Sanchez fight left a lot to be desired for me, for Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee's coming in here shorter. He's 5'9". We're not 6 feet tall. Kevin Lee has the 3-inch reach advantage. All right? We all know Kevin Lee has great wrestling. All right, Kevin Lee has great wrestling, but what we've known is that Kevin Lee tends to have cardio issues. First round Kevin Lee is a motherfucking problem. But after that, you can pretty much wrestle him and submit him fairly easy, like a la RDA, a la Tony Ferguson. You know, we've seen it time and time again. He fades. He gives it his all, unfortunately, in the first round, my boy Kevin Lee. And then, just kind of gets zapped out of him as time goes. He got beat up by Daniel Rodriguez. And honestly, I forgot that happened, and I don't think he should have been getting beat up by Daniel Rodriguez. I think if he was scheduled to fight Sean Brady, I think he should have beat Sean Brady. All right. And he went to the third round with Oliveira. Think about how Oliveira is running through people. Went to the third round with Oliveira. Knocked out Gillespie. Dude, I'm excited for Kevin Lee, man. This is the story. Kevin Lee returns. All right? Kevin Lee returns to the UFC. A UFC Fight Night, Strickland versus Magomedov. Welcome back, Kevin Lee, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. That was my first UFC live event, was right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Kevin Lee versus Al Iaquinta at the Fiserv Forum. Newly built Fiserv Forum. Yeah, hell yeah. So I'm excited for Kevin Lee to return. All right, we got some more fights here. The first fight of the night, real disrespectful. Guram Kutaladze, who recently fought, I thought he fought Damir Ismagulov, lost a split decision to Damir Ismagulov, who I believe is fighting in the co-main. He beat Gamrot. All right, in the fight before that, he beat Mateusz Gamrot. Then lost a split decision that I felt like he won to Damir Ismagulov. And now he's fighting the very first fight against someone I believe to be a newcomer. No, this guy's not a newcomer. He's had one fight. He had a split decision victory. Why is Guram starting this card off? Kutaladze is better than that, all right? Stop disrespecting my Polish fighters over here, all right? Stop disrespecting my boys, all right? Stop disrespecting my boys. But yeah, we got some fights. Alexander Romanov versus Blagoy Ivanov. Let's not skip over that, because that's a man's fight right there. You guys know I don't like heavyweight mixed martial arts fights for the most part. Like, they usually are gonna suck and they're gonna be gassed out after the first round. Romanov could probably be gassed out after the first round, but I don't know. We'll see. I like Blagoy. He comes in there undersized, and but he's so skillful. He really be putting it on these dudes, and he just gets a bad rub from the judges, man. I've seen, he should have beat. I feel like I'm beating a dead horse with this, but he should have beat Derek Lewis. He should have beat Augusto Sakai. That was a split loss. That was a split loss for Lewis. Those were close fights that he 1,000%. They weren't even that close. They weren't even that close. They were clear that Blagoy had won those fights, but the judges, he got bad shakes, man. He should be 21-3 right now, and fighting some of the top guys. So I would definitely roll with my boy Blagoy in here. You got Alexander Romanov coming on a 2-fight losing streak to Volkov and Tybura. Tybura is on the rise right now. I don't know. We'll see what happens here. It looks like some good fights happening next week. I'm excited. I'll be here. And you'll be there when the day is new. And I'll have more ideas for you. And you'll have things you'll want to talk about. I will to my niggas. This has been the Babylon 5 podcast. This is your boy Jermaine Offense. If you guys want to follow this podcast on Instagram and Twitter, it's at Babylon5Pod. If you guys want to email this podcast at Babylon5podcast@gmail.com, that'd be cool. If you guys want to follow this podcast on Twitch, it's twitch.tv/Babylon5. If you guys would like to cop some merchandise, head on over to teespring.com/store/BOFpod-shop. And lastly, don't just be my Niji. Be my patrons. Head on over to patreon.com/Babylon5pod and you can be my patrons today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here for episode 201. Ilia is Hennessy. I believe he could be champion. I don't know if he beats Volk. Shit, at this point, I don't know if he fights Volk. What if Volk moves up to 155? You know what I'm saying? What bothers me is the potential of Ilia Topuria fighting Aljamain Sterling. Just when I mentioned the relationship between Merab and Ilia, and Aljamain has already announced that he's moving up to that weight class after his next fight. So that's what I don't want to see. Is some kind of rift between Aljo and Merab, or even Merab and Ilia, for that matter. Through that, that's what I would hope wouldn't happen. But I don't know. We'll see what happens. Thank you guys for being here. Another week. Same time, same bat channel. I'll see you guys next week. I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves and each other. And I'll see you when I see you. I'll holla.